Welcome to today's Frankfurt School Blockchain Center panel. The topic we're going to be discussing today is tokenization, and in particular, is it now possible today to really talk about the tokenization of everything? Is the tokenization of everything possible? And with me today, I have 5 experts in the field who are interestingly approaching it from different angles. We have some people here who are focused more on the market side and are really in touch with what is going on in the market, what developments there are. Maybe also on the technological side. On the other hand, we have some people here who are very well versed in the regulatory aspects, the legal aspects of this whole topic. And I hope this panel will kind of bring everybody together and have a very fruitful discussion about the topic and see where we are at right now and where we're going to be, maybe even by the end of the year, by the end of next year. So without further delay, I want to invite everybody to introduce themselves. Just a quick introduction about who you are, what you do, and maybe 2 sentences to start out with on what your view on the topic is, and if you think that there is or there will be a tokenization of everything. And I would like to start with Mr. Mauro Castellini from Bitcoin Swiss.
Pleasure to be part of this panel. Thank you very much, Maximilian. I'm Mauro Castellini, CEO of Bitcoin Swiss Liechtenstein. Bitcoin Swiss itself is a financial service provider in the blockchain space that is active since 2013. We are 280 to 290 employees and have our headquarters in Switzerland. Liechtenstein, we have also an office, and in Denmark, we have a lot of developers. We are working at the moment on a regulatory environment, so we are looking forward to be in the future, hopefully, a bank in Switzerland, Liechtenstein, or in both jurisdictions. And in the area of tokenization, that's a topic that's very essential for us, especially because many tokens or tokenized things will be or are securities, and therefore a banking license will be essential for us. And I'm very positive that in the future, a lot of things will be tokenized, and we will see a token economy where companies, machines, and people can interact with each other in a fully digital environment with tokens, with digital cash, and so on. That's all that I would like to mention for a start.
Thank you. It's a very, very good, very positive start to the panel. I like it. And then let's move on to Nicolas Weber from Amazing Blocks.
Thanks, Maximilian, for the invite. A pleasure to be here. My name is Nicolas. I've been in the crypto space since 2016. Started like most people with the trading side, right? Investing in early stage projects. Went through the ICO craze, consulted a couple of projects there. Then took a deep dive, I would say, in the security token space, as I'm head of business development at Amazing Blocks and also a co-founder of the Tokenization working group at the European Blockchain Association. And now I'm also currently the founder of Meta GameHub DAO, which is a project focusing on the convergence between DeFi and the metaverse, right? Therefore, fostering kind of the topic of MetaFi, which is kind of sometimes a bit easier in regards to regulation to cope with. And yeah, in regards to the perspective, topic of today, I would say that I'm a strong believer in the token economy and that basically the value exchange of any kind of value, whether it is real world assets, whether it is digital only assets such as data, for instance, all this kind of value will be exchanged in the form of tokens in the future. That's my kind of opinion in that sense. And therefore I do believe in the tokenization of everything.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nicolas. Now moving across to Mr. Andreas, who's sitting maybe a little bit at the interface then between the markets and the regulation.
Thanks, Maximilian. Pleasure to be here today. Andreas Traum, a partner with PwC in the financial services advisory practice, but looking after our initiatives in the digital asset space across all of our lines of service. That includes consulting, assurance, and tax and legal. And also part of our global network where we have experts at the forefront of developing digital asset topics worldwide. Regarding your question, I think the short answer for the introduction is, of course, tokenization of everything is possible today. From a technical perspective, we can do it. I think the second part of your question, is it sensible? I think that very much depends on what is the intention of tokenizing. That's something, and we'll get to more of that later today. I think it's important to be looking at the developing ecosystem and what are the use cases for either fintechs, traditional players, or individual customers on that market. And I think that very much drives the question of whether tokenization of everything makes sense or it doesn't. But it's definitely possible, and I would say increasingly it also makes sense.
Fantastic. Yeah, longer answer on the question. I mean, we're going to get deep into all of those sides later in the discussion, I'm sure. So starting with Thomas number one, Thomas Dünzer, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Thomas Dünzer. I'm the director of the Office of Financial Market Innovation of the Principality of Liechtenstein. And yes, I was the project's responsible for the introduction of the Blockchain Act in Liechtenstein. And so, yes, I'm also a believer in the token economy. So this was the idea behind our Blockchain Act, that we wanted to foster the token economy, so the tokenization of everything. And what we introduced, just very short in Liechtenstein, are two concepts of tokenization. One is the more traditional one about just a security approach and about SPVs. And the second one is about direct tokenization of assets or rights. This is how we implemented that. And this should not only be applicable to investment purpose or investment assets, but also for all kinds of tokenization of real world economy and e-commerce and so on. So, and the question, if it's possible, I would answer by it's legally possible, but every application needs to be implemented and pioneered, and this is the way we are on now. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And well, last but certainly not least, the other Thomas present today, Thomas Nageli, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a big pleasure to be here. My name is Thomas Nageli. I'm an attorney at law from Liechtenstein. I was a part of that work group Thomas Dünzer mentioned of the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act. I started 2011 with Bitcoin. Back then I was a student at the University of Vienna. Then started my 2013 my PhD about that space, actually, about blockchain and the legal nature of Bitcoin back then, actually. Now we advise projects in that area on a daily basis with our firm Nageli Attorneys at Law. My daily practice is not only to advise clients, but also to help regulators around the world to think about how to approach these issues and how to find good solutions and how to find balanced approaches. And your question is tokenization of everything possible. That was, as Thomas Dünzer already mentioned, that was one of the big questions Liechtenstein tried to answer with the TVTG, with the Blockchain Act. And that's what I refer to as the token container model, where the idea is actually basically that you can, that you have an as flexible model as somehow possible. You might dig a little bit deeper afterwards, but in the end, the concept is that you have rights and token represents rights, and then you can easily tokenize what at least our legal framework recognizes as rights, as transferable rights. So yes, this also means that the standard lawyer answer would be to such a question, it depends, and that's true as well here. It depends on the right you want to get represented by a token. If you can actually transfer that right, for example, there are some limitations in our law as well, that for some laws you just cannot transfer them. Therefore, it's the question is if it's not possible or if it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm really looking forward to that panel to discuss it in more detail.
Thank you, everybody, for your nice introductions. Lots of yeses, one, it depends, or two, it depends. I think that's a good basis to get going. Thomas, you said something very interesting. You mentioned that, you know, you believe it is possible, but everything needs to be pioneered. So in that sense, I would like to right away pick up with the perspective of the current market right now, and maybe talk about anything that is currently being pioneered that you are excited about, that you think is an important next step towards a more tokenized economy. So I would like to give the word first maybe to Nicholas Weber, and then feel free to jump in.
Yeah, definitely. Really appreciate it. So basically, if you look at the current market, I would say that there's definitely a lot of, pioneer use cases. I mean, sure, security tokens and other, let's say payment tokenization use cases have been around for some time. But what I really find interesting right now, which is a big trend, is on the one hand, the tokenization of data, as well as on the other hand, generally the tokenization of digital only value, right? So just for instance, lands in the metaverse, you can think of it something like virtual real estate in that sense. So that's something that is currently being pioneered, where I see a lot of traction going. And it's I would say, everyone is always trying to integrate real world, let's say, assets into DeFi, which is quite difficult. I know this from experience, but integrating these digital only assets, for instance, in the form of an NFT into DeFi as collateral is much easier. And I think that's definitely something we'll see, a lot of traction in the future, especially when there's more price transparency when it comes to NFTs. So that's something that I would single out as like a pioneer use case in that sense.
Thank you. That is very interesting, especially the point about, moving the real world to DeFi versus thinking about if that's something that we really maybe even need to do or even should do when there is an alternative. Are there any other opinions on it?
Would like to jump in exactly the point from Nicholas, because that's always the point where I say that we will see the challenge, because as you say now, with the metaverse and decentralized and things like that, where we really have this connection, we definitely need to speak about securities, but where is the line, especially if we look at, for example, the German regulation? Where is the line between, yes, it's fine to do it decentralized with no regulated counterparty. It's not a security or something that could be comparative. That this line needs to be found, and the regulator needs to tell us where this line is. And at the moment, it's very difficult, because if you, for example, as mentioned, look at the German regulation, we are very fast in a way where the tokenization will be very difficult to handle. If you, for example, look at the Liechtenstein regulation with the TVTG, we have this clear line. We know where it's a security, where it's not, where this digital layer will bring me a problem if I trade it or not. And I think it's very important to look in this tokenization world also at this problem, because there are many use cases out there that are amazing, and a lot of people make huge amount of money, but possibly the regulator will come to them and they will have huge problems in the future, because they are based in Germany or in Switzerland or in Liechtenstein or wherever.
Mauro, good point. You mentioned the unclarity or ambiguity, and I think that's what initially we said, it depends on the intention of tokenization. Why do you tokenize, and in the end, what do you do with the token? So I said, I think the tokenization of everything is possible. I mean, it's in the end, it's a digital representation of a certain asset. You can do that. You can define the terms of the token. You can issue it on a private, public, hybrid blockchain, wherever you wish, and then you have it. You can take a piece of expensive artwork, for example. You want to tokenize it just to share and document the ownership. That's possible. You're not anywhere in a security world. If you do that, however, with the intention of trading that, of participating in the appreciation of its value, then you're in a trading world. Then you're in a security world. And I think so far the legislation does offer that distinction. But I'm with you. I think it needs to be a lot more clear, and there needs to be more guidance on the use cases. And I think that's one of the things that we expect from MiCA, because one of the challenges, of course, is the comparability or the flexibility to move tokens. And if we're talking about token ecosystems, we're not thinking about national boundaries and geographic limitations. We're quite on the opposite end of that. But if we look at the reality of different legislation, then we're looking at something totally different. And I think that needs to be overcome. If you think about offering crypto derivatives, it used to be a completely unregulated market, and that's where some of the largest exchanges globally started. Now, if you move into Europe, it's regulated. Hong Kong is issuing legislation on that, so it's changing. And I think that's one of the challenges, that we need to provide some sort of stability and support that international flexibility. Because the true token ecosystems, they're not stopped by national boundaries. They support international movement of assets and an international ecosystem, and that's what needs to be supported by legislation at the same.
And I think maybe if I can add here something, I think that is the whole idea, or one of the main reasons why it is good that we have good blueprints like the Liechtenstein Blockchain Act and the TVTG. Why is that the case? Because as Thomas Dünz already said, we thought about quite a lot of these ideas and how to tokenize assets very early, like 2016, the work group started. And you have to imagine that like quite a lot of these use cases, you find them in the published report of the Liechtenstein government, like how to tokenize a physical object, how to tokenize IP rights, like this is already covered. So that was actually very forward thinking, like if you now analyze what is happening. And I will come to my point in a minute, but that is actually the idea that you have a blueprint which already covers quite a lot of these questions with some answers, and it works. Like it's enforced since 1st of January. You see these use cases, they are actually developed now out of Liechtenstein. And I totally agree to what Andreas just said. We need at least like an approach which is somehow harmonized in bigger economic areas, because Liechtenstein is a very small place. So yes, it's interesting and nice if you have a good legal framework in Liechtenstein, but as an entrepreneur, you want to like provide your products and services to a big market with like as easy as somehow possible. And that's the beauty of harmonization in the European Union. You can actually, when we talk about the financial world, you have like, if you are a bank operating out of like Liechtenstein, Austria, Germany, wherever, you can passport your services to all of the other member states. And what is now proposed with MiCA on a European level is quite interesting, because there we hopefully have passporting as well. It's actually in the draft that it's passportable. And that is actually the reason what we should focus on, I think, is that we get good regulation, because what could happen as well is that if we have on a global scale legislation which is actually driven by bad cases, because they think there was a big exchange, it was fraudulent, there were a lot of bad cases, investors lost their money. Now we have to regulate it, or if there's one, everybody knows which company I'm talking about, thinking of issuing a stable coin, a global stable coin, and regulators are shocked by the idea of that there's an alternative to the money we use on a daily basis. Yes, then they will try to regulate it, but they don't have time. They want to have quick answers. And that's the wrong approach. The right approach is to sit there and say, like, what's the vision? And the vision of Liechtenstein was to make the token economy possible, to provide the legal framework of the token economy. And then it takes time. You have to educate yourself. Regulators have to educate themselves. Like, it's not regulators, it's actually lawmakers. So this political process needs time as well. You have to understand what you're doing. You have to understand what's the pro and the cons of a new development. And blockchain is not only good or bad, it's neither. It's just a technology. It's actually a combination of technology. And in some areas, it makes a lot of sense, and in some not. But to use the existing regulatory approaches for everything is actually not a good idea in the blockchain space, I think. You see that we have some bad examples already. So I think if we talk about tokenization of assets, and if everything is possible, I think, yes, there's almost everything is possible. And the beauty of this technology is that now you can do the same as we do that like since ever, but without intermediaries. And that just reduces costs. It makes things easier, more secure, easier to use. And that's the idea. And like if we don't allow that because we don't understand it and we want just to stop it to happen, yes, that's one approach, but this technology exists. So if we, for example, not only talking about Liechtenstein or Europe, if we are not doing it, others will do. And sooner or later, then we are actually not leading anymore. I mean, I don't know if we are still. That's another question we can discuss. But I think now we are at exactly that point where it is decided whether Europe leads the way here, and or is at least somehow part of the party, to call it that way, with tokenization of assets or not. And it's more than just regulating a very small part of it, because tokenization of assets from a legal point of view needs a lot of answers to a lot of questions, actually. Sorry, it was a little bit longer.
That's okay. It's a lot to unpack, a lot of information. I think some very interesting points. On the one hand, the harmonization you spoke about. On the other hand, looking at who is the leader. So maybe that's the next question I would like to take to the panelists. Who do you believe is right now in the lead on the one hand. So, I mean, we were talking about Liechtenstein, of course, a lot on the one hand from the lawmakers and the regulatory aspect, maybe even on the other hand, from the other side on the technological aspect, where do you see the most happening in tokenization right now? Yeah, whoever wants to take the word, maybe start with Mauro and then we can go around.
It's a difficult answer because then the question is, yeah, exactly what do we speak about in the tokenization area, digital asset securities whatsoever. I see definitely a lot of movements happening in the Asian market, and that would also be one quote that would have been very important for me today, that Europe has here the chance with MiCA and other regulations to be a front runner, to be in a clear regulated environment and not over-regulated environment, and really lead this new technological innovation. But we see that it's starting to get way more and more complicated and not as fast as it should happen. And therefore, Asia and the United States are moving very fast. And if they regulate something, they will do it really fast and with full power. And therefore, I'm again scared a little bit that even if we were very fast in Europe, especially if you look at Switzerland with the crypto valley, where most of the big crypto foundations are based, I think we are at the moment a little bit losing that benefits we have built here. And if we really lose them, yeah, it would be a pity, because Europe could be the leading innovation hub of the world in the area of tokenization and blockchain. But I think up to you other guys. How do you see that?
I think it's
maybe if I can add something to that point, I think it's a very, very important statement we have made, Mauro, because I think the chance of Europe is the harmonized market. So I think no other region in the world has such a well-established harmonized financial market regulation. And if MiCA comes into force, I think we will have a good step forward just to offer something that no other region in the world can offer. But of course, as you mentioned, there is still a risk that this process of regulation gets too burdensome to a certain point, so that it's not so attractive as it could be. And then it could turn into the opposite. And this is really a kind of a risk I see in the moment. But this is a point where Europe is really has a very, very positive effect, and something that, for example, the US has not such a kind of a harmonized financial market where you can offer your products all over and have access to many clients. So the effect we have now, that's every country has its own kind of regulation, and it's increasing hard to get to the market access cross-border. This is something that hinders this development, and this is something that we see now in the moment. But I expect, or I hope, that as soon as MiCA is in force, this will change.
Yeah, from my side, I think it's also, very hard to single out one specific jurisdiction, I must say. And I think this is kind of also aligns with the idea of decentralization, right? Every kind of jurisdiction has their own benefits. I think, especially in Liechtenstein and Switzerland, we have a lot of clarity when it comes to the bigger picture than in other jurisdictions, such as, let's pick Wyoming, for instance, that we have a lot of clarity when it comes at least to DAOs, potentially with the respective DAO LLCs, which also has its, let's say, negative aspects on the other hand. And then also Asia has some perks, although right now, obviously, we have the China FUD in the market as well. So it's from my perspective, it's really hard to really kind of single out one specific jurisdiction. When it comes to the tech side, I think Europe is quite well, right? Especially Switzerland is a real hub from a technology development in the blockchain space. And, I would like to just say one little thing here, which I find quite interesting. This is not necessarily my personal opinion or something like this, but just like some food for thought, something that Outlier Ventures CEO Jamie Burke always kind of promotes, is that at some point, potentially not all, but some jurisdictions will at least subordinate in some sort of way to the metaverse, right? Because it's just very hard to really regulate such a decentralized and global market, where it's even for DeFi protocols or projects, sure, they have potentially an entity in one jurisdiction, but it's really hard to pin it down to specifically one jurisdiction, right? It's the same what happened with Binance, with all the different entities across the globe. So I think, we have to maybe see it from a different angle. And that's where I think also Thomas said something very good, that Europe at least has the benefit of the harmonization. And I think that's really a crucial aspect, that all the jurisdictions are aligned instead of having their own respective regulation, that we have some sort of standardized regulations across the globe. That's kind of my take on this.
It's interesting when we say, and we heard that a few times, when we say that Asia is leading, and to some extent that's that's obviously correct. But I think also we need to look at what makes up Asia. On the one hand, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, I think, is one of the furthest advanced when it comes to piloting a CBDC. On the other hand, we all saw what just happened with China, completely prohibiting both cryptocurrency mining and any kind of trading with crypto assets. So that shows a bit the ambiguity we have there. If we just look at just take CBDC as one example. It's obviously not just about CBDC, but if we really want to facilitate global markets, if we want to come to very quick security settlement across the world with instant finality, having some kind of stable currency, be it a CBDC or be it a stable coin like Diem, I think is one of the drivers. PwC just issued it's the global CBDC index, and it's just very interesting to see where the different jurisdictions are in terms of maturity, in terms of the legal ramifications for that. And unfortunately, Europe with the digital euro is very far down that list. It doesn't make the top 10. We have other countries like some Caribbean countries which are much more advanced. And I think that's definitely one aspect where as Europe we need to get our act together and accelerate the speed, because a lot of the use cases that we talk about, at least in the financial services spectrum, are going to in some shape or form rely on having some kind of digital globally accepted currency. On the other hand, and that's been said several times, I really second the notion of using the advantage that we could possibly have in this harmonized financial market in Europe. But we'll have to see how MiCA finally gets adopted and how fast we are, and then make sure that gets adopted. What we saw in Germany, and quite frankly, quite surprisingly, but the legislation that was enacted actually saw a surge in global interest. We have a lot of players now looking at the German market, which they wouldn't have done some time ago, just because there was a bit more clarity on some small aspects of crypto business. So I think if we can leverage that opportunity and quickly enact MiCA in very favorable terms for this economy, then I think we have a very good chance in Europe to retain a leading position.
Thank you, Andreas. Yeah, so I think that the nice point to take from that is that theoretically we are in a good position in Europe. Technologically, even with the regulation as well, we have a real chance here. And like what Andreas just said, finally, we can see that sometimes seemingly smaller steps forward can have quite a large impact on the mood, on the kind of whole interest of the market in certain jurisdictions. So with that, I guess the next question I would have, and what maybe fits in with the topic of the panel as well, is whether or not you believe there is a significant delay, not only from the side of, first of all, we say technologically is further than the regulation, but even on the other way around, when there is a new piece of legislation, added regulation in the space of tokenization, how long do you think it will take for this to really hit the market and for the market to, in some cases, either adapt or leave or come and start working with these new regulations? Maybe, well, I guess from Liechtenstein you have some more experience with it because you've had something happen. So
yeah, maybe I can take that, and Thomas, maybe you can enhance that from your experience. But what we see is that, I mean, the Blockchain Act in Liechtenstein is a quite a far in front thinking piece of legislation. So we try to cover all kind of business cases that we could imagine in our working group. And so in practice, you see, of course, that the companies are trying to focus on the most simplest things, or just where the market is ready for that. And so, for example, we introduced the concept of the digital share, uncertificated rights, and so some companies just try to issue or focus on this security token and everything that is related to that. Other concepts of tokenization of art or property, for example, needed more of legal work before. So the use cases were there, but it took some time, or even much more time than we expected, that the use cases were ready for the market, and it's just for implementation. And I think this is the case for almost every use case we could imagine in that sphere, that it needs a kind of the right setup, or the market is ready for this concept, and then it's possible. It's kind of hard work for the first companies that want to do that, and then it breaks kind of a dam, and then it opens up for mass exploitation. And so I expect the TBTG in Liechtenstein would last the next 10, 20 years, so that every use case we thought about is implemented fully, or in a full manner. So it's always this kind of the chicken and egg problem. Without regulation, without legal security or legal certainty, it's not. Many companies don't dare to step into that market. And on the other side, if you have a legislation, it takes then some time to develop the market implementation.
I think to add here from a perspective as an advisor, what we saw, and I think that's very interesting. Whenever a jurisdiction provided a lot or only a little bit more clarity, and imagine like the first jurisdictions regulating that industry, they focused on ICOs. Like what they did is actually just said, like, it's fine to do an ICO out of our country. You have to just follow this and that rule. And what happened is that one company, a bigger one, said, now we are incorporated in whatever jurisdiction A, B, or C. And everybody was rushing to that jurisdiction. Like you saw that and like local regulators were flooded with requests. And then what we saw is that sooner or later they figured out, okay, yeah, but the regulation is only focusing on ICOs, but I want to provide actually a cryptocurrency exchange. Like the regulation doesn't help here at all. And then you saw that there was frustration because there was a lot of demand and nobody was actually able to handle it. I don't say that's not happening in Liechtenstein. Like if the top 30 exchanges want to get registered tomorrow in Liechtenstein, oh my gosh, yes, we have an issue, But and what happened is that everybody was escaping from these jurisdictions. Like if you don't do well, if one big service provider comes to a jurisdiction and leaves half a year later for good reason, because they said like, okay, it was fine, there were a lot of promises, but they was not able to do what they promised, you see the opposite effect. Like everybody is leaving the country, even if it would be good. So coming back to the idea of decentralization, if we have a good solution, if you propose a good code to a decentralized project, it will be adopted. If not, you will have the bill. They will not adopt it. They will not use it. And I think that is with legal framework, it's a little bit different because you cannot just propose it and say like, look at that. People like we try our best. Only from speaking from the Liechtenstein point of view, because we think it's not the baddest piece of legislation we saw so far, put a lot of efforts in it. Just have a look at it and comment it. If you like it or not like it, what are the pros and cons? What are the challenges? What we have to do better? It's just a very comprehensive piece of legislation. It's like you provide a layer 1 protocol, a very good one. You think like you covered all of the cases, but there will be always a more clever person telling you, yeah, it's fine. You covered maybe 60% of it, but here and there you have to amend. And we should learn from each other. That you can listen to interviews from me some 2 or 3 years ago. I always told everybody the same. It's not that this jurisdiction got it right or this has no clue what they do. That's not the case. We learn from every approach because every jurisdiction have to analyze their own legal framework framework, have their vision, what they want to do, and then provide answers. And then we learn from each other, what works and what doesn't work, you know? And the good thing is that we will see immediate results. Like half a year later, as fast as a jurisdiction is now the new big crypto hub, a year later, nobody talks about them. Like you see it with conferences, like everybody's rushing to whatever conference. A year later, yeah, what was that country again? I forgot about it. So it's that's actually good. It's you have to provide quality, and then hopefully it lasts.
Andreas, yes.
There's a lot of, I think there's also, you know, a lot of factors that are going to influence the take up of you know, new offerings. In Germany, we enacted the Digital Securities Act, by which you can issue promissory notes without having a classic centralized registrar. So you could offer your promissory notes without going for a classic, you know, Clearstream or other so one is having that, you know, the legal possibility to do that. But when talking to market participants, you know, so far there's been very little take up of that, because it only gets interesting if you actually have a marketplace that supports this end to end. So, you know, just by being able to issue that security electronically, you know, if you look at the rest of the value chain and there's, you know, no digitalization end to end possible, it's not going to, you know, it's not going to have a big take up. We always said one of the advantages of tokenization is you know, reducing complexity and reducing cost. In the first use cases that we look at, there's actually no cost advantage yet. So it's going to take more than just having the possibility to issue that note electronically for the market to really take that up at a larger scale. We're now looking at the second stage of that law, which will cover funds. But we just now got the clarity that in order to, you know, be a electronic funds registrar, you need to be a registrar in the classic sense as well. So that's now already, you know, hindering new market entrants to offer that service if they were not established, you know, in the classical world already. So that's kind of also having, you know, the being brave enough to really, you know, offer, you know, full-fledged digital regulation and offering market participants to really, you know, benefit end to end. And it's also going to, you know, depend on all of the market participants being or sufficiently enough of them being willing to adopt these new technologies and actually offer an end-to-end digitalized service. And I think then you will see more pickup.
Andreas, maybe I have one thing to add here. It's actually interesting because we started in 2018. We have the first actually security token offering, which with an approved prospectus by our local regulator, which was passported to the European Union. And in I think it was in December or late 2019 when we issued actually the first fund. The fund was issuing their shares in form of token. So that already happened. What we also realized, and that's obvious, I mean, that's a primary market. That's easy to offer something for the first time, but we need liquidity. So the secondary market is a very interesting topic. I wrote a book about that, and it's one area where I'm really interested in, because there you could find a lot of efficiency gains here. Because you need liquidity. If you offer something for the first time, I mean, investors, they have to be able to sell it again. And I think we all agree that we have to solve the challenges for the secondary market. And that's the interesting part with the digital finance package the European Commission issued in September 2020. Everybody's talking about MiCA, but what is at least maybe this of the same relevance, or at least very interesting, is the pilot regime they're proposing, because that would be at least to learn how to organize the secondary market for these tokenized financial instruments. And coming back to the non-regulated area in the old days, like in the old days when we talked about that we issued utilities in the form of ICOs, what was so clever about that is that you had immediate liquidity. There were cryptocurrency exchanges listing these tokens, and you could actually buy it and sell it 3 weeks later. And that's what's missing on equity tokens, on bonds, on also on funds. The problem is you don't have these exchanges. We didn't solve the secondary market problem so far, and that's, I think, that will be a game changer if we really solve that, like that we have liquidity for these actually tokenized financial instruments.
There, I would like to definitely, in the end, from a technological perspective, we would have this solution with decentralized exchanges, what Nicholas was also mentioning shortly. But there again, regulation is not clear. FATF travel rule topics also mention, oh, they will be regulated and you need to have this and that data of your clients. But that's also what I really like, because if we see here a clear regulation, it's even possible that we will interact with decentralized systems, no central counterpart that needs to take care of it. And it will be regulated, it will be compliant, and it will be even more secure and with less risks than we do it nowadays. And that's what I'm really looking forward to also have there a good and clear regulation. And that's always strange if someone from a business says, yeah, I love regulation, but exactly there is the point. I'm looking forward to a really clear regulation in that areas, because that will give new business opportunities to me, and that I can offer new things that my clients will be able to offer with decentralized exchanges, with centralized exchanges, and so on. And that the market will offer this liquidity and not a centralized exchange or market makers. But if I have $10,000 that I do not use, I can use them for providing liquidity in a trading pair. And that's what I'm really, really looking forward to.
This is an important point. Can you hear me? Okay. The interesting thing that we have seen in the last years is that the European Commission has decided to introduce a new regulation framework for crypto assets, and not to integrate that, as Thomas mentioned before, in the existing financial market regulation. This is a huge step, because it was possible to design or to draft a completely new framework. Of course, it's based or related on MiFID, but it has some interesting aspects that are really made for crypto, and this is very important, and could also be done in the future for DeFi systems, because there we have a similar problem than like before, from the traditional financial market to crypto asset markets. It's hard to draw the line between traditional instruments and new instruments, and traditional services and new services. And the same problem, as you mentioned, Mauro, we will see in the DeFi space. And there, for the DeFi can develop with a high legal certainty, it's necessary to really draw a line there, what is regulated and what is not regulated. And up to that point, if this is not done, it would be hard to develop properly in the DeFi space in the regulated sector. Of course, in the internet, everything is possible, but this is not the thing that we want to look at, because we want to integrate that chances or the possibilities in the regulated sphere.
Yeah, from my side, just to kind of chime in quickly, what I always find hard is, how do you really regulate a decentralized protocol, right? I mean, that's a common question in the space. You can regulate, let's say, someone maintaining the front end, like it was the case with Uniswap and their issue with the SEC. But like, personally, I think there needs to, as you mentioned, Thomas, correctly, there needs to be drawn a line. What exactly is it that you regulate? And I think you should also, or generally one should not always over-regulate things in that space, to really also foster this, let's say, spirit of decentralized access to the global financial markets, which something like a KYC environment can provide, but often it does not provide. And I think therefore a potential solution could also be some sort of metaverse/DeFi-based identity, which is not necessarily KYC identity, but still has some certain aspects, such as a reputational score with positive interaction with the protocols, which can also then have an influence on, let's say, the collateralization ratio, as obviously in DeFi, everything is over collateralized, unlike it is the case, right, in the traditional markets. So I think that's really something we would have to look at and really draw a line. Okay, these type of assets need to be regulated, but others may not need to be regulated, or actually here the code is the regulation, so to say, because the code is the law at the end of the day and people can rely on that code. So I think when it comes to reward assets, obviously it's very difficult to kind of go down this rabbit hole, but here again, kind of, I know talking about it a lot, these digital only assets I think are really the key, and I think that's kind of where the line can be drawn, right? You have the reward assets where there is, let's say, a certain regulation involving KYC, AML, and all these requirements. And on the other hand, you have the digital only assets, which are solely part of the metaverse, where potentially you do not necessarily need a regulation. You could have some sort of access feature through, let's say, that metaverse-based identity that you utilize when interacting with the DeFi protocols, as well as the metaverse, where you can also have some sort of, let's say, CV on chain and these type of aspects. But on the other hand, I think when it comes to really regulating, you cannot regulate, right, a decentralized protocol that has not necessarily jurisdiction from a backend perspective, at least. The front end, sure, because there's always an entity that is behind that. And I think that's definitely going to be an issue for a lot of the DeFi protocols, also when Mika, let's say, hits the markets in that sense. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see that, when regulators across the globe kind of realize that it's almost impossible to really regulate a decentralized ecosystem.
I think, Nicholas, that's very interesting. That is exactly the topic of the book I was referring to, because there I analyzed it for the secondary market. And I said, like, when do you need regulation for a decentralized exchange? And this really depends how you organize a decentralized exchange. And the question is, if you analyze it properly, the question is, do you anyway need regulation? Because if a decentralized protocol is avoiding the ability of whatever minority or one bad actor to do front running, to place fake orders, to change the order book, if it's not possible, then a lot of the regulation we have in place for the centralized exchanges is not needed anymore. And I think that's the right approach. So we have to analyze what is possible by technology and what is really organized in such a decentralized way that we have alternative solutions to the same questions we have anyway. And I have that on my LinkedIn page. Actually, it's open source. It's open source. It's just a website. It's a Medium article. It's a whole book in English, and I dig a little bit into a little deeper into the trading, clearing, and settlement of a trade on a secondary market. And that's really a very interesting area. And for me, if you really have a fully decentralized exchange, operating fully decentralized and organized in a proper way, and the code is done in a proper way, I don't see the point of regulation there. I don't see it.
Definitely read the book.
May I? Or just a short addition to that. So I think this is the really important question. First of all, we have to draw the line between regulation and not regulated DeFi. And then we have to ask ourselves, why is regulation necessary? And of course, there are some reasons why regulation could be necessary, investors protection, or AML and so on. We can discuss the whole list of that. But we have to be aware that the technology is completely different. This is what Thomas has really analyzed very well in the example with his decentralized exchanges in his book. So that's we have other risks with DeFi. So we should find a way to understand the risks and then to regulate if it's necessary to those risks, and not to just to take the existing regulation that is made for intermediary-based applications to intermediary-less application. This does not make any sense. Just stops this kind of innovation.
That's exactly a very good adding to that, because to organize the trading and clearing and settlement, there you might not need actually regulation. But as you said, there might be other risks like money laundering or financing of terrorism, where it is not there is no decentralized suitable solution yet in place. Maybe it will be developed, maybe it is already developed, and I'm not aware of that. But you see that you have to really look very close to actually what is happening out up there. And that's another thing, like not every DEX is a DEX. Like they tell you they are decentralized, they're not. Trading is in a lot of cases really very centralized, very centrally organized. And but I think that's the beauty of this technology. I mean, this evolves now, and we see that it is developing other answers as we had them in the past. And I think it's our duty to look closely and to understand it and try to treat it as it has to be treated. I mean, if it's not working well, then yes, we have to find alternatives and it should be regulated. But if not, yes, why not? Let's give it a try.
Thomas, I think that was a great speech for the advantages of decentralized finance. And I think in the end, really, you cannot have locally restrained regulation for truly decentralized financial infrastructure. But I think you also have a very good point on the secondary market. I think that's a question of creating that liquidity. And I think for that, we need to create the interest in having that liquidity. And I think that can still quite well happen within the regulated markets. I think we're seeing first examples of that where we have regulated crypto exchanges. I think for other asset classes, when it comes to serialized tokens, that's exactly where we need to see the market develop towards. So actually that we have liquidity in those. Like I mentioned the example in the beginning, we have that if you tokenize a piece of art, it's fine, you can distribute ownership, but if you actually want to trade it, it's only going to happen if you actually have liquidity in that. And I think we're a far cry away from that. And the second point, I think the regulation, and you mentioned anti-money laundering, fraud, sanctions, controls. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting uphill battle. I think, but it's also a chance for the community to build trust, because a lot of that comes from, in the end, trying to protect the investors, trying to protect the market participants. And I think there's still a very big, it's a paradigm shift between what technology can offer and what we as a community of countries believe we have to control and regulate. So that's going to be a very, very interesting topic going forward. I think technology-wise, we can do a lot. We need to address the question of how do you guarantee that level of scrutiny that regulation provides, right? And that's a lot of the business that we're actually doing is making sure that whatever we do in the digital asset space actually is compliant with AML and other regulations. So that's going to be a very interesting field of development.
Here, just quickly, also from my side, when it comes to the scrutiny, I would say, right, like what really is more transparent than a decentralized on-chain based ecosystem, right? So it's really, I would not say necessarily the transparency, it's more also the intuitive user interface potentially, which is where DeFi and generally the crypto markets are lacking. Of course, crypto nerds like me can use it, but the everyday people, so to say, will not be able to utilize it, right? And I think that's also a big issue that we need to solve to make it more accessible. And here, I think everyone here in this panel is quite involved in these type of aspects, but still, I think we need to do more to really also foster, on the one hand, the intuitive user interface, as well as on the other hand, the education of people to really know how to interact with these protocols as well. Because I know a lot of people that have been in the space and are so-called experts, right? But they don't even know how to do a Uniswap transaction. So it's really something where everyone has to kind of put in a lot more work to really educate people in the right approach and how to interact with these communities, and also be able to, okay, here we need the regulation for these aspects because it has an influence on real-world aspects. It has an influence on, let's say governments potentially even, and here we do not necessarily have to regulate it. And I think that's also what Thomas reaffirmed as well before. So yeah, I think it's going to be exciting to see how this plays out in the future. We're definitely on the right track, but still a lot of work to do, right?
Absolutely. And we do have an audience question, and I hate to jump in here because I believe this was a super, super interesting discussion. But I think we should answer the question. It's a very specific question on the case of patent rights. And the question submitted is, well, what will tokenization look like for patent rights? And in particular, does the tokenization come before registering the patent? So does the token itself create the patent, or must there first be a patent registered that can then be tokenized? And well, I guess it's a deeper question. Anybody that has an answer, go for it.
I mean, from my side, I would definitely, sorry, go ahead, Thomas.
No, I mean, from a legal perspective, that's one use case where it says, yes, technologically it's possible. From a legal point of view, you might be able to represent that in a token, but it makes no sense because as the question already implies, patents you have to get registered. And if you, at least in Liechtenstein, if you doesn't change the way how you get a patent and how you actually add or amend the register with the use of blockchain technology, it's it just doesn't add any value. That is exactly the question, the reason why Liechtenstein also had to amend the Corporate Act to allow digital securities, that if you transfer on a blockchain, because you can actually amend the share registry of a company with the use of blockchain. And you need to have an amendment in our Corporate Act to do that. And I think without having it analyzed in every aspect, I think it's the same with patents.
But from my side,
which is not that easy to make happen.
Just quickly here, I would like to refer maybe to what VitaDAO did, right? I mean, they actually did already transfer an IP NFT that was biopharma data, so to say, as well as the patent as well. So I think if we look at the current infrastructure environment, right now we would have to have, let's say, a centralized party that registers the patent, and then we tokenize it as VitaDAO did it. I mean, they have, so to say, a blueprint, I would say, for this. And then subsequently in the future, I would envision though that there is more or less a maybe decentralized registration of IP in general, and then it will be much more seamless. But that's obviously a bit of future music. Sorry, the stage is yours, Thomas.
Yeah, sorry, we all have the same ideas. Just to extend the point from Thomas, Liechtenstein is a member of the European patent system. So the question of this register is the same in whole Europe. So I do believe also that it's not possible to tokenize a patent by now, but maybe, as you mentioned, Nicolas, in a decentralized way in future. But this is a huge project to do that. But of course, blockchain is a registered technology and could do that. But what you could do by now is, and I think this is much more reasonable, is to tokenize the license rights. So, and this is, of course, also the economic value. So if you transfer the license rights of a patent in a token to another party, then this is the use case that is more interesting than just tokenizing the patent. But because the patent is just the grant by the state or by the authority that you have the exclusive right to use this idea or this technology filed in this register. But the rights you can transfer, and this is something that you can tokenize.
Okay, so I think that's a very good answer to the question, and a nice workaround as well to say, well, you know, what is the point of the patent? We can tokenize the right. And I guess in a way, this does answer the question of the panel: is the tokenization of everything now possible? So we have found one case where it is not directly possible, but maybe also just maybe does not make sense, at least in the way it would be possible right now. So I do have one more question to close off, since we have about 2 minutes left now. We've spoken about, on the one hand, liquidity on the secondary markets. We've spoken about businesses waiting for the regulation and the technology being there. But maybe another aspect is, or that is significant for the adoption of tokenization and a tokenized economy is, like Nicolas briefly mentioned, the actual consumers and the customers. Do you see that as still being a big challenge, on the one hand, from educating people, on the other hand, building a trust in the system? And where do you think that would come from, so that the actual consumers will also make the step towards tokenization, and we don't just have a bunch of regulators and business models reliant on it, but nobody that's going for it, using it?
I think there are two things that are like that, definitely, because on the first side, I think it will work and it will be bigger and better than it ever was, as soon as no one sees what he's really doing. So it's like an interaction, like nowadays with a smartphone, and it's where it's really easy. The interaction will be absolutely easy done with apps that are sometimes even provided by some financial service providers or other technology providers, that the client does not even realize that he's interacting with private and public keys, but he's buying tokens, he's buying tokenized stuff, he's working with CBDCs. then it will work, and then everyone will be able to use it. Because I can see it also nowadays, even friends from myself that know me for a long time, where I've explained how to interact with private and public keys, with MetaMask, with ledgers and so on, they do not like to do it. They have their cryptos with Bitcoin Swiss or with Swissquote or other providers, because they say, look, Mauro, I do not trust myself enough that I will not fuck it up. I know that the provider will not do it, and if they make a mistake, I know where I have to go and where I will get my assets back. But if I do it by myself wrong, it will be gone.
That's, I think, a very good moment. Go ahead, Thomas.
With you, Mauro. I mean, the blockchain is a technology, and the tokenization will just the fundament of many applications. And as soon as nobody notices that it's based on blockchain, then we are ready for mass adoption. So as long as it is so complicated to use Uniswap and then use it's not so complicated, in fact, but people think it's complicated, then they won't use that. So education is, of course, important, I think, if you want to invest in crypto assets. But if you just want to use it for token economy or everyday transactions, then it's just a technology. Like, nobody understands how a smartphone or internet is functioning, but everybody is using that because it's easy to use.
I think we're going to see the evolution of the token ecosystem come, and with that, we're going to see the mass take up of it. I think if you just think back a few decades and think of something very common everyday things we have today, you wouldn't have thought that possible. And if we just think further, and it's less that just investing in crypto assets, but really looking at tokenized ecosystems, I think eventually sometime down the line, it would be very normal for people not to be thinking of wallets anymore, or traditional bank accounts, or paying for services, because a lot of that, we're going to see a convergence with Internet of Things. And I think all of these technologies are going to, converge, and the token ecosystem is going to be a method of financing or facilitating, the payment streams in that new ecosystem. And so I don't have any doubt that we're going to see it. It's just going to take some time. It's going to take the building up of public trust in the technology and the use cases on top of it, and hopefully some smart development of regulation worldwide as well.
Yeah, and just from my side, one last sentence is that everyone should just start applying and learning by doing principle, right? I think that's really the key. Everyone should be a bit bold and just try it out. They don't have to make like $1,000 transactions, maybe not even on Ethereum, because we all know the problem with the gas fees, but still just try it out. It's not so difficult. There's a lot of tutorials, a lot of material out there. And I think that's what really everyone that's a bit scared, so they should try, and they'll see it's not as difficult as it seems.
Thank you. I think those are some really good closing remarks. Everybody on the panel is nodding, so that means everybody must be agreeing. At this point, I would like to thank you all for your time, for coming out, having this discussion with us. I think it was a very, very fruitful and interesting discussion on tokenization, which, well, I mean, it was a big question to answer in 1 hour. So I think we did quite well and had some very good thoughts on it. And at this point, I would like to thank everybody.
Thank you, Maximilian.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.